Welcome, welcome everyone to the International Mentoring Community, all things a mentoring lounge. And we have a guest with us today. Just to let you know, Doug, who usually joins me, is off on a seminar. And I asked a friend of mine if she would come and have a bit of a conversation with us. And I'm going to introduce her in about 30 seconds, but I just wanted to give you all an understanding is that we're taking a look at the connection between resilience and mentoring today. We're going to share 5 insights, might be 6, might be 7, you never know. And we'll see how this all unfolds. But the person that we have joining us today is Patricia Morgan, and I'm going to have her share a little bit about who she is, and then I've got a question to ask her to get us going. So I know you use the word spunky, Patricia. Would you like to share a little bit about what that word is in terms of your life and where you're at and what you're up to?
It was my effort to redefine getting old, as if that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because I don't like the alternative. So I was having health issues almost every month in my year of turning 70. And I declared at the end of that year that I'm a spunky senior. And I started calling myself a spunky seniorpreneur, let people know I'm still in business as a therapist and speaker. So that works very well for me. It just reminds me that I can choose to use my energy the way I want.
Yeah, I always smile when I see that, or I see a reference where I watch one of your videos and you use the word spunky. I think it's great. All right, and it so fits for who you are and how I've come to know you as well. So that's really wonderful. So just to remind everyone as we get into this topic is please subscribe. That'd be great. And I know Patricia and I would certainly enjoy your comments if you want to add them in, and that would be wonderful as well. So Patricia, we're going to get into this topic today of resilience and mentoring. And to be able to set this up, I'm going to talk about mentoring in a sec, but I think what would be really helpful for people is to understand what resilience means to you and how you came to look and feel and promote and engage with this topic of resilience. There's got to be a story here that I think would help everyone.
Okay. So let's start with the definition of resilience. Resilience is the capacity to face and deal with or bounce back from challenge. And that can range from disaster to personal challenges to loss to poor behavior of other people, or sometimes, poor behavior of yourself. And that capacity is under the umbrella of positive psychology, knowing that we have some tools, some strategies, some abilities to get ourselves either back on track or staying steady in the face of those challenges. So it includes, stress management, communication skills, all the tools in positive psychology about optimism and building on strengths, which we'll discuss as we go along.
For sure. How did you come to it though? Personally, there like being a spunky seniorpreneur, I'm sure that this didn't happen just yesterday. And actually, how did you come to know about resilience and really get into it?
And study it. Well, my master's degree is in clinical psychology. I've been a therapist for years and years. And then when I was 53, I stepped into the professional speaking world and I hired a coach. And she looked at my website and she said, Lighthearted Concepts. That was the name of my business. She said, you're not telling jokes, are you? And I said, well, sometimes I do, but that's not my main strength. And she said, how is your audience and your clients better off when you stop speaking? And out of my mouth, I blurted, well, they're more resilient. She said, get everything off your website and become a scholar in resilience. So I phoned Dr. L. Siebert, who was in Seattle. I forget the name of the university there. And he agreed to mentor me. And I wrote a book on resilience. I went to California and studied with a trainer in resilience called Nan Henderson. And so it just kept evolving.
Oh, wonderful. So, I think I knew a little bit about, but you added a little bit more into that. So I thank you. I learned a little bit myself this morning. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So we're going to take a look at this notion of resilience as it's connected to mentoring. And I think what I'll do is I'll just offer for the audience, if people are not aware of how we use mentoring in the international mentoring community, mentoring for us is really about a two-way trusted strategic alliance, relational arrangement, whatever word you want to put in there, so that both the mentor and the mentee can grow, develop on a personal and professional basis. And the key for us is that when you're in a mentoring connection relationship, is that there's really wonderful questions that are being asked. And sometimes the mentor has to help the mentee learn how to ask those questions of the mentor, and vice versa, because it's sort of one of the ways in which to be able to get into what we call the collaborative conversation of mentoring. So I wanted to share that with everyone so that they had a little bit of that understanding. So when it comes to the resilience and the capacity that you're talking about to be able to deal with the challenges that are there, I always remember change surrounds challenge, right? CHA and then the NGE. So change surrounds challenge. So a lot of resilience is sort of connected to change, challenge, that kind of idea. And that certainly plays itself out in the world of mentoring, because one of the reasons that a mentee may be coming to the mentor is that there's change and challenge in their life, right? And they're looking at ways in which to have a conversation to find out ways to get there. So when we thought about these 5 insights to develop resilience, I know Patricia came up with 5, I came up with 5, but I purposely did not ask her, folks, what were her 5, and I did not give her my 5. And I thought that what we would do is just have this open, fun conversation around that, and Patricia agreed. So that's where we're going to head now to have a little bit of fun. So with that in mind, but just before we dig into that, in the work that you do you do much mentoring as one of the educating approaches in terms of your business strategy, or have you woven it into your world very much? I'd just be curious. I've never asked Patricia this question, so I'm just curious.
Not a strategy by all means, but for 12 years, I was involved in a speaker school, basically, fast track program for emerging professional speakers. I created it and I mentored in it. I called myself a mentor because I was always involved. And people came to me and said they wanted to spend more time with me. And so typically, people did not necessarily call me a mentor. Some did, but some called me speaker mommy.
Okay.
Some called me colleague, some called me fellow speaker. So I love learning. And so when I learn something, I love sharing it. And so I do love learning from other people. And I started something called Living Room Labs a number of years ago, where people came to the house because I had so many people saying, oh, can you help me with this little detail? Because the speaker school provided the foundations. And then people wanted to know, how do I do an effective slide deck? How do I do an interactive workshop? And I said, well, if you're asking, other people are asking, so let's come together. I'll share what I know, and other people can share what they know. And those living room I called them living room labs, were a wonderful experience. And so I still have people that connect with me for support or to give support, but I typically go to masters for my own learning. During COVID, I took a deep dive into studying trauma. And I've got certifications now in finding joy, trauma treatment technique, and I've been studying internal family systems, and as well as the nervous system. I've been mapping people's nervous system so that they know what happens to them when they get triggered. That's
Okay.
all been very rewarding.
Oh, that's great. And
Yeah, in a way, being a therapist is sort of like being a mentor in a way. It's a very intimate process.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And for those who are listening in, know Doug, Doug Lawrence, the co-founder, and he does quite a bit in the world of the mental health mentoring and support in that. So we have lots of conversations on it, and we always applaud Patricia for what she does as well. So that's great. So why don't we take a look at a couple of these insights. And if you, a couple, it should have been, let's look at 5 of these insights, all right, and see where it takes us. So what would be the first one you'd like to share with us so we can just sort of unpack it, unfold it, and see what's going on?
Well, I believe if you're perceiving yourself as a mentor, that you need to be a good role model, so that you're walking your talk. And I love Albert Schweitzer's line, example is not the main thing in influencing others, it is the only thing. So if you're not walking your talk, you lose all credibility. And I like to think about role models are people that maybe you don't have a relationship with. So role models are important in the world. I have 2 very different role models that I think about. One is Bette Midler, because I love her spunky way of being in the world. And the other is Maya Angelou, right? So I don't have a relationship with them, but I have relationships with a number of people that I considered mentors, and Dr. L. Siebert was one of them in my field, right? So
Yeah.
I was just felt so charmed that he helped me write my first book. And I asked if he would ever come to Calgary to do a training, and he said, sure. And then I arranged with the University of Calgary to have him come and do a workshop so that I get to pick him up at the airport. And, it was just a lovely relationship. He died about 8 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. So the role model aspect. Yeah, I always remembered in my own life is I always looked at where the feet were pointed of the person I was interacting with. That was one of my ways of remembering it, because if their feet are pointed to the right and there seems that we're going to be going to the left, I get a little confused. So it was sort of like my way of bringing what you're talking about to the foreground for me, right? And so it was just kind of a fun way to remind myself. So what would be the second one you'd like to share with us today?
Creating emotional safety.
Much needed in today's world, I would think.
Well, yes, the world has become more dangerous emotionally. And of course, there's events happening in the world that have us feeling not safe physically. And so we can create emotional safety for one another by knowing when I am regulated, when the other person is regulated, when we are co-regulated, and when we are dysregulated. Either one of us gets dysregulated. Let me just show you. Hang on a second here. I've got one little guy. Nope. Oh, there he is. This is Pooch. And this is Miss Poos. Miss Poos. So like they're getting along fine until some noise bothers Mr. Pooch and he starts barking. Woof, 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 woof. Now, can she stay regulated, or does she get triggered and go and hide, fight, flight, right away? Or does she get activated into defending herself and go, and then he goes, woof, 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 some more. So emotional regulation, if you're the mentor, I think you have the responsibility of seeing what you can do to stay regulated with whatever techniques you need to use. I've got a little quotation here from Porges, if I can find it. Oh, here he is. When we're with significant others, the responsibility of that relationship is to keep our autonomic nervous system out of states of defense. And Dr. Stephen Porges is the developer of the polyvagal theory, which has helped the whole field of trauma. So better understanding the charge of the fight, flight, angry, defensive, criticizing state, which is highly charged, a lot of energy, and then the collapsed, give up state. And so can we be in the presence of another person who gets charged by a conversation, by even just a word that is said? Can we stay regulated and welcome back the other person into a regulated state?
And sometimes with the mentee in that change challenge that we mentioned, sometimes we'll come to a meeting and they may be a little off kilter and there might be some emotions that are going on and they might have just come from something. And so from a mentor point of view is to be able to take those breaths and enter into that conversation with the, okay, let's see what we can and do. And that goes back to that role model aspect that you mentioned as well, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
to do that. Yeah.
Right.
But
So,
but also when the mentor who has had their own little event just prior to going into the conversation need to really pay attention to where they're coming from as well. I think that's what you're also mentioning is it's both ways, correct?
yes. Oh, of course. Absolutely. So if you get dysregulated, do you have some tools to bring yourself back to center, to ground yourself? Do you have ones that you have practiced? I talked about the capacity and having these tools to bring yourself back to being in the present moment.
Yeah.
Or is your prefrontal cortex gone? Stephen Levine talks about the flipping the lid. So something happens or is said, and the prefrontal, we have these two prefrontal cortexes, which were developed, in our human development, we developed emotional safety by connection. But if one of us gets triggered, the flip the lid and out comes a lot of this emotion. We don't, where the heck did that come from, right? And do we flip our lid too? And then there's either nobody's there or we're in conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the great things in a mentoring connection, mentoring relationship, it doesn't necessarily often happen between them because you've established that relationship, but it's more about if someone brings something in or being your own self-aware. I think that's really we're going at the moment. So that's wonderful. So, well, thank you for that. I may have interrupted you. Was there something else you wanted to share there?
Oh, well, in this spunky senior's brain, it went in and out. So just keep going.
Oh. Okay, fair enough. I'm just, I'd like to add one because I think it's something I think that's important and something that I learned, which is very valuable around the notion of sleep and rest and your own personal well-being, right? Mm-hmm. For a resilience aspect, a way in which to develop it for yourself. And I remember there was a number of years there I didn't necessarily sleep the best. And so when I was doing some of my mentoring, I was always wondering, I feel a little off kilter here. I'm just, what happens with this meeting? Okay, what had just happened in that meeting, right? And then I started to pay more attention to what was happening to me under the well-being banner. Any thoughts around the notion of sleep, rest, well-being, and resilience and mentoring from your perspective?
Well, it's a basic billion-dollar business to tell us to sleep better, eat less, exercise more.
Yeah, and I guess we've got these apps now. I think there's one called Calm, right? Yes. That you can turn on and you got it on your phone and everything like that. Right.
So sleep is a basic requirement. By the way, just an interesting little tidbit. I just attended was an hour presentation on therapy relationship to sleep, because if you don't get enough sleep, you can actually start to have mental health issues. It's very much aligned with mental health issues. And of course, lots of accidents. We have a lot of accidents happen when people are sleep deprived, and there's a reason truckers have to rest, every so many hours when they're driving. It's you hear 8 hours. People on average should have 8 hours. Apparently, research is now indicating that 7 is the optimum. So somewhere in there.
Yeah, and I learned that, because I was like doing like 5 or 6 kind of idea, because I was pushing the evenings, getting up early to write and all that, and
Right.
I couldn't quite figure out why I was a little off kilter, and it sort of affected these business relationship, and then affected my mentoring, and
Right.
I got to look at this. I got to look at this, and that's when I started to figure that part out for myself.
I
So,
do want to mention that there is a fair bit of shaming that still goes on for night owls. We are people that are night owls that stay up late and sleep till 9 or 10 in the morning get just as much accomplished as morning larks. So my husband is a morning lark. He wakes at 6 o'clock and he's bright and alert. That's his best time in the day, is the AM. For me, I start to show creativity and a very active mind in the afternoon and the evening. So I go to bed. Yeah, I go to bed anywhere between 12 and 1. And for a long time, I have felt that there was a judgment about that. And there is, actually, if you take a look at a lot of the sayings. And I say early to bed and early to rise messes up your social life. There we go. So
good on you. Good on
right.
you.
So about sleep, if you are a natural night owl, that's your rhythm. And I was born on a farm and grew up on a farm. And I spent my childhood being told, now, Patsy, don't be so lazy, and my face falling asleep in the porridge. You know,
Yeah,
my rhythm is more in the evening. So if you are a morning lark, by all means, get up and enjoy the morning. I have a client actually whose partner grumbles about her, you should stay in bed. Like, why are you getting up so early? Because she wakes up and is happy for the day. So we need to honor both ends to get a proper night's sleep. 1/3 of people are night owls, 1/3 of people are morning larks, and the other third are sort of in that middle range. But
yeah.
honor when your rhythm wants you to rest.
For sure. Well, that's where I learned, is that go to bed earlier for me, because I like to get up and write in the morning. Okay, great. I found that sweet spot for me, because I was binging and banging and bonging all over the place there for a while, and it just didn't help. So it's wonderful that we shared this, because I think it's really important for mentors to truly understand that, because it's also to understand the mentee you're interacting with, right? If you're saying,
Yep.
well, let's have our 7 o'clock in the morning coffee, we'll get together, right? And the person goes, right? Nah, that's not the way we need to do this, right? So, yeah,
Right.
no, that's great. Well, what's the fourth one that you'd like to bring up from your list?
Build on strengths. That is so important. And many people do not know what their strengths are, and we can provide a mirror for that. And it was very affirming for me to have my strengths acknowledged and affirmed. So Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology, had spent 10 years researching strengths, and he has an inventory. It's called VIA Signature Strengths. That's VIA, VIA, Signature Strengths, 240 questions, and you answer them, and your 5 top strengths come up. Marcus Buckingham wrote the book and did the research on strengths as well. And his books are Go Find Your Strengths and then Go Use Your Strengths. In the 1970s, a psychologist by the name of Elias Porter developed a strength inventory. And strengths turn up in the Myers-Briggs indicator, the DISC, all kinds of those personality indicators. They put the strengths in clusters. So I really don't think it matters where you identify and say, yes, I have the gift of, or the strength of, creativity, analytical thinking, organizing. I don't think it matters where you find that, but I think it's important for a sense of life purpose. Though I've taken the workshops and read the books on life purpose, and I just one day after exploring and doing workshops on strength said, you know what? I think life purpose is knowing your strengths, that takes some work, and giving what you can. So my two top strengths are creativity and helpfulness, empathetic helpfulness to people.
Okay.
This-
So
yeah.
would another phrase like know yourself fit into what you're sharing right now?
For me, that's a bigger phrase that has to do
Okay.
with knowing your thoughts, your beliefs, your values, your emotions. Many people aren't in touch with their emotions. Do people know the difference between saying I feel jealous and I feel envious? Do they know the difference between I feel hurt and I feel sad? So there's that. Know yourself to me is behaviors, thoughts, beliefs, and emotions, and then you throw those all then support your values and your beliefs.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because it's one of those phrases that we find in the mentoring books and that just know yourself so that when you enter into and I go, okay, that's great. I agree with you.
Right.
That's why
Yeah.
we talk about like resilience and rapport and
Right.
confidence and some of these other words in the international mentoring community, right? To
Right.
bring more to the surface. So,
Well, maybe I should backtrack a little bit. What is a strength? A strength is um, an inborn. You get born with talent, then knowledge and skill. It's basically a cluster of behaviors. So somebody has got the strength of organizing. They just love to organize, and they may have an analytical skill as well. And so it's like you're in the zone when you're doing this activity. You'd volunteer to do it. So if I get to
yeah.
do a creative project, I just had a friend last week said, "Oh, Patricia, we're doing this training and people are coming from across Canada. Would you be interested in hosting the Saturday and having some fun and some team building?" And I said, "Oh, sure, I'd love to do that." Somebody else would say, "What? What are you asking me?" But
Yeah.
I know why she asked me. I love making up these interactive activities and celebrating people, right? And welcoming people to our home. So it's like creative juice, and I get to help. So those two together, I go, ooh, juicy, right? But ask me to organize my filing drawer.
Not there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so
from
Beethoven had the talent of music, but he still needed to develop some knowledge and some skill, if that makes
yes.
sense. And then there's
Yeah.
Howard Gardner's 8 intelligences. That was a big comfort for me too, and it's kind of aligned with strengths. So I used to think that because I couldn't remember facts very well, that that I didn't have an intelligence, but to find out there's 8 intelligences, very exciting.
Yes. Well, when I went back to university the second time, I found out that I had visual intelligence to the right, and I had never used it. And then all of a sudden, I started using it, and that's why one of my strengths now is I can map conversations. I can actually sit in the back of a conference, and with the big flip chart paper, I can draw what is being said in the conference, right?
Right.
And being able to present it in this visual language. And that became a strength of mine that I
Wow.
carried on in a lot of different things. So I get what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And as a mentor, leveraging those, but to your point as well, is finding out what those strengths are of the mentee, leveraging them, and then finding out, okay, we can lean into those, but what else might you want or need or desire to develop to find who you are, right? Not to all of a sudden, oh, well, I guess I better go learn this is because everyone keeps telling me I need it to do my job. Well, that may not be the best way to go about doing it. Would you agree with that, where I'm going with that conversation?
Well, yeah, if we build on strengths, then we can say, I see you over and over again demonstrating visual skills, right? It's such a gift you have. So we can have that conversation. And I love that. I love Elias Porter's definition of a weakness. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
A weakness is a strength used at the wrong time with the wrong people and too much. So if I use my creativity and I use it too much with the wrong people at the wrong time, I can create chaos. If I'm too busy being helpful at the wrong time with the wrong people, like one of the wrong people is my husband. He says, "Don't smother me." So we have these shadow words for all the strengths, and I think that's a lovely frame, because when we find ourselves muttering about somebody's poor behavior, maybe we can see a seed of strength in it. So if I say somebody's really bossy, I can say, "Oh, I see them demonstrating some leadership skills there. I
Yeah.
just maybe don't want to go the way they're trying to lead me."
And that's where the mentor is understanding that and being able to frame that in such a way as to be able to bring that out in the mentee. You're onto it, is because I know I love to play with words, and sometimes I'll actually say things, and you get that sort of deadpan, huh, kind of look, and I go, "Oh, hang on a minute, I did it again, didn't I?" Right?
Yeah.
Because I love to play with words, but it doesn't mean that it's what's needed at that point in time.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
I got another example. This isn't really a classic strength, but growing up, my mother used to say to me, "Patsy, Patsy, you just talk too much." And I remember the day I called her and I said, "Mother, I found the right people at the right time at the right place, and they're paying me to just speak."
And therein is another way to live one's life. Well, that's great. That's great. So we've covered four. So we have the role model, the notion of the emotion, the sleep, the strengths. What would be the fifth one you'd like to offer to us today?
Acknowledgement and appreciation. So I like the idea of an effective appreciation. And I learned this from psychologist Margaret Wolf. I trained under her for a while with a group of women that were experiencing domestic violence. And she would tell me exactly how the group would work. And then at the end of the session, she would say, "Thank you for putting the tissue box exactly where it belonged. It built my sense of confidence in you, and it helped make things go smoothly. I also appreciated how you put the chairs 6 inches apart, because then the women weren't touching each other." So what's the formula? The formula is the thank you, and then how you feel receiving whatever it was. Could have been some piece of information or some kind of help. So how you feel about it, built my confidence in you, or it touched my heart. And then the result or final effect of the person's behavior that's made a difference. And that way people know what to do a second time around. Just "you are awesome" or "you are wonderful," name calling people some illustrious name, doesn't tell us how we can be successful next time round in assisting people. So I think it's just a little richer. And I really watched her and went, wow, she ever deepened her expressions of appreciation and acknowledgement. And we
So
can do
from a
this
mentor,
with a
yeah. So
mentor.
from a mentor point of view, then being able to thank the person for the question you just asked, because you framed the question with some clarity that I can actually get into, rather than sort of sitting there going, "Okay, which way do I go to answer this as the
Right.
mentor?" Right. So that would be a good example there, wouldn't it?
I think so. Like for me, if you ask me a profound question, I would say, Oh, thank you. I'm feeling really curious, or I'm really feeling stimulated about the answer. And thank you for the gift of having me question that aspect of what I'm doing or my life. Yeah, that would be the result.
Yeah.
The whole area around sharing a feeling adds a sense of connection and intimacy.
Yes. Yeah, and to your point, we don't celebrate that very much. We don't appreciate that very much. We tend to just sort of skirt by that. And I've taken that up as being a little bit more of something that I weave into what it is that I'm doing and I'm saying. And that's why I brought up the question component, is because if you want the next question to come and the next question to come, you want it with some clarity, some confidence from the person, because then you deepen and enrich this mentoring alliance, this arrangement that you have. And Doug and I talk about that quite a bit, and it's great that we're leaning into it and speaking about this, because I think we need to constantly strengthen this in the world of mentors. So.
Well, what you focus on expands. And all the research in positivity says we have to really up in our culture the comments that are positive driven rather than the criticism and the negative and the corrections. So that's true with John Gottman's work with couples. And he's a 95% accuracy of determining which couples will get divorced. He spends maybe 5 or 10 minutes with them, and he can predict who's going to get the divorce and who's going to be together based on a number of factors. But one of the factors is the number of negative comments compared to the positive comments. Educators have found this with children, usually 7 or 8 positives to 1 negative, so the kids don't get discouraged. Barbara Fredrickson, the positivity researcher, found it also in the workplace. The number one reason 75% of people who leave the workplace is because of a negative boss. So that would be true also in a mentoring relationship. If you got into a pattern of critical conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that happening, and it's good to remind us about that and the framing of that conversation, because it is two-way. It's both personal, professional. That's why we define it that way. So
Right.
It goes both ways, because what we're always hoping for is when the mentee becomes the mentor, and therefore it's sort of we're just sharing mentoring, right? I could be the mentee at this point in time. You could be the mentor, or vice versa, and we're having a conversation until we're not having a conversation, because it's time to close it down, right? And that's really important. But I'd like to just sorry.
I was just going to mention Dr. Sydney Simons, when giving feedback. I just love it. He says, "Tell me what went well for you." This is if you're a mentor or a supervisor. Tell me what went well for you. Tell me what you struggled with, and how can I be helpful? That's it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated, does it?
Three quite simple questions, but they're very affirming. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I have one. I had another one on my list. We sort of covered off the other ones in a sense, but there are the words like vulnerability, wholeheartedness. These words are starting to show up in conversations. Any thoughts around the use of words like vulnerability, wholeheartedness, from your perspective?
Yes, it sounds like Brene Brown speaking.
There's an element of truth there. Yeah.
Okay, the shame and vulnerability researcher. And I've got her books, and I've got 3 of her books I've done summaries of and are on my website. So those, yes, and she uses the term wholeheartedness. Wholeheartedness to me is very similar to the word resilience. We get tired of words, and then we start having other words come along. Martin Seligman wrote the book Authentic Happiness, and then he apologized to the world for using the word happiness, because really, he said what he meant was flourish. So then he wrote the book Flourish, and both books have very similar content in them, because words mean a whole lot to different people. Some words trigger, some words we embrace, some words don't have any meaning, some words have deep meaning. And vulnerability to me means sharing what I feel with an element of risk. I'm not sure how it's going to be received. And so we're back to the point about creating emotional safety. When you're a therapist, that's probably your number one job, is to create that co-regulation as best you can and create emotional safety best you can, so that people can go to those vulnerable places that often have been hidden away for a long time. They're scary places. Vulnerability means I'm willing to share what might be scary for me to share. Even to say, one time for me, to say, I don't know, was scary. And for some people that we perceive and label arrogant, they may have a fear of being wrong because they may have been punished as a child. Now I'm starting to sound like a therapist, but childhood unconscious experiences and beliefs drive us. We're like an iceberg that most people only see the little peak, and underneath are all of these experiences that we've had since the time we were from the womb to when we were born, right? Can't tell you how many people don't share. I believe I am unlovable, or I believe I'm ugly, or I believe, and the I ams are so, some of them are so tender. And I had an I am stupid label on my forehead. And most of the I ams that are derogatory are not true. You know, it's a very sacred thing to say to somebody, you are. Be very careful about it. I say there's three ways you can end you are in an emotionally safe way. You are lovable. If dogs and cats can pee and poop on the floor and still be lovable, so can we humans. And second, you are capable. That takes some work. That has to do with strengths. And the third is you are resilient. And all the other you are's we want to be careful about. You demonstrate creativity. You demonstrate a richness with language, but you are not a creative. You demonstrate. We can all demonstrate all of the strengths. Can we do it with flow and ease? Anyway, I got a bit of a tangent there.
No, that's great. No, it brings richness to what it is that I was going after, is because it's, and I so enjoy the notion of, we did a show last week, which was, I think, more words, and the words that move mentoring forward. And it was to this point, in a sense, is, right, the importance of words, right? And what words are still there, icebergs and those words that melt away. And Doug and I were having some fun with it, but just simply because of the importance of words. And I couldn't agree with you more. So that's wonderful.
Yes. And words are thoughts that come out into the air, and we can create mental illness with our words. I ended up spending a night in a psychiatric ward, and I know how I ended up there. I used to yell at my kids, you kids are driving me sick and crazy. I'm going to go sick and crazy if you kids do that again. I repeated that over and over again. We got to really watch what kind of neurons we're developing in our brains by what we're saying. And so there are words. So nobody makes you. I get my audience to say, I make me and you make you. And by the way, Stephen, you did a good job, right? And other words such as never. You never told me you loved me. Well, that's not true. You always. You make me. I'll try. You should. You have to. You must. I say, quit shooting on yourself and others and watch the masturbating, because there's very little should. Are there consequences? Yes, but there's not necessarily any shoulds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
that we disempower ourselves and we disempower others by certain languaging that we use. Even saying I can't. No, you're choosing not to. Notice the difference between saying I choose to or I choose not to compared to, oh, I can't.
Right. So from a mentor point of view, folks, is that as you're listening to your mentee and the phrasing that they're using to describe who they are and what their experience is just really start paying attention to some of these phrasings, right? It becomes really important. Well, we're getting to a point where we're going to be closing it down here, Patricia. And one of the things that I do is that whoever I'm interacting with in the mentoring lounge is because I get to do the introduction. Is there anything that you would like to share as a way in which to exit the mentoring lounge? And you get to share away, but just before you do that, so I'll give you a second to think about it. I'm going to put a link to Patricia's work, whatever she provides to me. That will be in the show more notes, and you can certainly do follow up with her and ask her questions and get her books and her material and all that. So I certainly celebrate that you get to know Patricia, and this has been great for me. And therefore, I'm hoping I've given you enough time that you can sort of share what's something you want to close us out with. And then when you've done that, I'll just say take care and I'll end the stream.
All right. My favorite quotation is by the philosopher Hillel. If I am not for me, who will be? If I am only for me, what is the point?
Great. Okay. Well, everyone, take care.